Welcome to Beyond Burnout. How do you feel like you can cope a bit better and find calm in the chaos? The aim for the session today is threefold. I'd like to help inspire you and to cultivate some curiosity. And to do that, we'll relook at some amazing things that your body and your physiology does and some creative ideas. And that leads into one of the other outcomes is, for me, although the theory and the science is incredibly exciting, it's all about really putting it into practice. So for me, I'd like you to leave with a personal, almost like a roadmap, but some key things that can help you to better manage your energy and your well-being and your sense of presence and resilience. And then thirdly, just amazing opportunity to connect with yourself because you're here, and I'm going to give you quite a few reflective questions and exercises, but also an opportunity for us to connect together as a community, clearly interested in this very, very important topic. Um, Thanks. If you sometimes it's easy to forget that you're not on mute and there could be background noises. I'd love to say that we're in a living room and everyone can just speak up whenever, but that's not always practical, right? So those are the objectives. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom, the top right, you get a little pop-up that says view. And I like to keep it in gallery view. If you put into speaker view, you're going to see a bigger picture of me, but I'd like to not be the star of the show. So on gallery, you get to then see everybody that has their camera on. And thank you for those of you that have got your camera on. It is great. You can also put your hand up if you have a question at the bottom under reactions. You can send me some love and send other people some love or some party vibes. And then you can also raise your hand. And then I'll notice that. And then once, if you have a particular question, then you can always lower your hand. It's all quite formal, right? It's like going back to school. And for those of you who want to have a bit of fun, and if you have the latest version of Zoom, do you know that you can also do things like this? Not that I want you to get too carried away. What do you think? And you can add some special effects. Those are under the video settings. Anyway, the things we are left with when we aren't able to all be in the same room, right? Okay, very important. I'm going to cover a lot of ground today. I'm going to give you lots of ideas, but I certainly don't want to give you a sense of overwhelm. So I'm going to lower my hand. Otherwise, it looks like I have a question to ask myself. If you leave here with one thing that you can center around and create a new ritual and bring that into your life, and that can help you create a sense of calm, that is perfect. And stay, if you're able to stay till the end. I know one or two of you have told me that you might slip away 10 minutes before. I'll try and make sure that we actually wrap up a bit earlier so that you don't miss that. But I'm going to pull it all together. And not only I'm going to share a few surprises with you, but I'm going to make sure that you have a very clear idea of 1 to 3 things that you can put into place wherever you are today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, immediately, to get the benefits from this. And this topic is deep. It might stir up emotions. It might bring up things. So stay curious and compassionate too. And if anything comes up and you need to be in touch or you want to speak with me, you should all have my email. So please feel free to reach out to me. Because the one thing I know is if we don't want to get burnout, we need to stop living like we're on fire. And I have been to the edges burnout is a very big spectrum. I'll speak about that a bit later. We use burnout so loosely, but actually, if somebody had burnout, if any of us had burnout, we wouldn't really be on this call because we'd be clinically booked off and potentially have organ failure. So there's a phase, right? But I know that I've gone to the edges of what I would call burnout or my capacity or resilience or of the woman that I want to actually be. And so I have a lot of personal experience around this, and I know how to live on fire. And what I know is that when you blow out a fire, right, when you start to slow down, there's always a bit of smoke. So in the beginning, it can be uncomfortable, but stay open and curious. Try new things, because in the beginning, there might be a little bit of resistance, but then as your ego gets over that and you actually give your body a chance to experience it, you can be quite surprised by the results. Right. So when we have a room like this and we're talking about topics like this, some personal stories might be shared. Can I ask you to feel free to share anything outside that I've shared with you? But if somebody shares a personal story, don't share their story. And when we go into what I call the breakthrough rooms, those are not recorded at all. So it's only this main session that's recorded for people who have registered but aren't able to attend. And when we have a lot of energy, right? In fact, let me ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like you're bouncing off the walls, you're actually struggling to stay a seat or in front of the computer, and 0 being like you really wish you were in bed fast asleep, where are you right now? 1 to 10. Would you pop that into the chat? How's your energy? Wow, 2, 7, 5, 4, 3, 5, 5 to 6, 8. Quite a range, but I'm seeing more of slightly mid to lower numbers. Okay. Because when we have a lot of energy, we can move mountains, right? However, when we don't have a lot of energy, everything can almost feel like a mountain. And so to arrive, I'm going to share one of the things that helps me sometimes when I feel like I'm a bit overwhelmed and when I don't have words to articulate how I feel. And to do that, I'm going to read a poem that's based on burnout and fatigue by one of my favorite poets, David White. He's an Irish poet. And the poem is called Sweet Darkness. So I don't know when the last time was that you sat back for a minute and had somebody read a poem to you. But here's your gift. So sit back and here we go. Sweet Darkness. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure that you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. So you've come into the sweet darkness where the next hour or so will create a place where you are not beyond love and where you will be able to find places in you that can bring you alive and be able to, I think approach this crazy life and adventure that we find ourselves in. And so to get us started, an analogy, because this weekend, I'm not sure if any of you got some of these roses, but roses have, they've particularly got 3 things on them. So there's the rose, there's buds, and there are thorns. There's also leaves and a stem. But if we look at the rose, the buds, and the thorn, what I'd like you to give thought to is, let's say the rose, I'm going to pop this into the chat, is something that you're celebrating or that's something that you're grateful for. And then the buds we're going to get to, because the buds are often a symbol of potential, something that's going to open up and grow. And you're going to have a whole lot of bud ideas. And then the thorns could be things or something that's challenging you at the moment. So if you take a look at the chat, the rose is what you're celebrating, and then the thorns are challenges. Let's start with the rose. Is anybody celebrating anything right now in this moment? Is there something that today you're happy about or grateful for, or something that's bringing you joy that you're happy to share in the chat, or to quickly unmute yourself and just share in a few seconds? What are you celebrating today? Barbara, married 33 years. 33 is one of my magic numbers. That's great. Lisa, it is lighter longer. Yeah, I've started thinking about blackout curtains because summer's coming. Summer's coming. We have a birthday. Somebody appreciating going for a walk. Another birthday. Wow, just started a new business. That's great. Your health is your greatest wealth. Indeed. Indeed. New earrings. Nice. I don't know when I have these sparkly new ones. I didn't think about that. So why is this important? What just happened now, for those of you that have thought of something that you're happy about or grateful for, celebrating, is your brains produce some dopamine, and dopamine makes you feel good. And if you hang out in that feeling of gratitude, it doesn't take much longer, and your body produces oxytocin. And oxytocin is a bonding chemical, makes you feel a sense of connection and belonging and calm. So it does the opposite of what a lot of cortisol does. And goodness knows, lots of us have got a lot of cortisol in our system. So I'm not sure what drew you. It could be like I've shared, that you personally have experience with the topic of burnout and fatigue, or that you care for others that may be in the same position. But the fact is that we're all under incredible strain. I mean, global pandemic aside, just in terms of climate change and politics and economic pressures and daily life and relationships and parenting and health, there's a lot to deal with. And now added on that, this complexity, something that our generation certainly has never experienced, this amount of physical and cognitive uncertainty, which is hugely exhausting, brings us to why this topic is so important. So I'd like to know as well, what are your challenges? And I'm going to encourage us to use a little bit of technology to bring in creativity, because creativity is another technique that can help, that we're going to discuss a bit later. So I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with Menti, but what I invite you to do is actually, I'm going to share a slide, because I'm giving you permission to pick up your phone, or not to answer WhatsApp or Telegrams or Clubhouse messages and things, but rather to go to open a new browser. So, let me find my slides. I don't have them open. There we go. Is to open a tab in your browser and go to menti.com. And I'm going to give you a code in a moment to pop in there. And then I'm going to encourage you to answer a question. And together we are going to create a Wordle. So go to menti.com. Menti is MENTI. You should see that on the screen. And then the code that you type in is 9166. I'm going to pop it into the chat as well. 062. And you should see a question that says, what are your thorns? What is challenging you at the moment? And you can put 1 to 3 things in. So put in your one answer or 2 or 3 things, anything that comes up. There's no right or wrong here, whatever your intuition is shows. And then you'll see, I'm going to share the screen, and you'll start seeing what we're all potentially feeling thorny about. Actually, that's not going to work unless I share my screen. There's quite a lot of moving parts. I wonder if Zoom will integrate to verbal commands. Wouldn't that be great? Zoom, share screen. There we go. You should see the Wordle on the screen. So we can see the weather, uncertainty. The bigger the words, by the way, it means more people have shared that as a concept. Colleagues, fear, poor sleep quality. Yes, I second that. I'm struggling with that too. Partner's divorce, working long hours, lack of focus, volume of emails, intense back pain. On that note, be sure to, I'm standing at the moment because I like to stand and present, but sitting is the new smoking. So if you're needing to stand and stretch and move, if that helps you to focus, please do that. You're in charge of you. We can see their employment, work, mornings. I'm curious to know a little bit more about that. Diet, isolation from friends. I thought we might have seen more of that. Mental fatigue. Okay. No holiday. Yeah, I bet there's more than just one of us experiencing that. Lack of headspace. Wow, good for you for being here and creating the headspace to be here. Amazing. Okay, so there are a lot of thorns and challenges, many complex things that are interrelating and affecting us. I'm just going to give you another 5 seconds or so. So if you've still got something to add and submit.
You wanted your own face, so I turned your thing off.
Okay. And just notice how that feels, not just sharing your own, but also seeing what everybody else is struggling with. And maybe this is a good time to just take a deep breath. So breathe a little deep into your belly and really exhale. Like make your exhale longer than what it usually is. And let any of this tension or these links to these thorns and challenges create a bit of less tension in your body. Yeah. What I also wanted to share for those of you that might be thinking about whether I'm going to share the slides and notes, I will send a follow-up note. And if you have any questions or you would like any more of the resources, because as we go along, Heather's going to be sharing some resources in the chat so that you can immediately download that. You can always respond to my email. I do know that some of you have registered but did not subscribe or did not say that you wanted to hear from me, in which case you won't. So please don't think that I'm not true to my word. You need to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to hear from you, or please send me the follow-up note, and then I will do that. Okay. Does anybody want to perhaps come off mute at this point and just express how they feel in terms of seeing the different challenges and thorns? I'm just giving those that like to speak a chance to also verbalize. You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. And hi to those that have just dropped in. So lovely to see you. Elpa. Hi there. Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. No, it's really encouraging when I saw that board, because I think we're all sort of experiencing sort of similar concerns and sort of I won't say obstacles, but just sort of similar traits there that we're running through, the uncertainty. And I think we're becoming more resilient now. I think initially last year it was a huge shock to the system, but I think over time we're getting a lot better at managing the issues that we're encountering.
I'm glad you're saying that. I'm glad, because I've also heard, thank you. I've also heard the opposite to that. That, for instance, Brene Brown, one of her recent podcasts was about surge energy depletion. So the fact that in the beginning, for the first 6 months, we all had to push through and produce a lot of adrenaline to get over the initial shock of the first lockdown and what was going on. And now for many places of the world, like here in the UK, where we're in yet another lockdown, but we're now not just 6 months, but 12 months in, that we're starting to reach actually deeper levels of apathy and fatigue and perhaps a bit of cynicism. So yes, we're learning techniques, but it's also easy to potentially get pulled down the other road. So it's good just to keep an eye on that for sure. And now's a time to actually really be critical in looking back at your self-care and the kind of techniques and things that you've got in place to look after you, and to be aware of where your energy goes and what happens when you're triggered to stress. So Viktor Frankl, who's the author of Man's Search for Meaning, a psychotherapist and a concentration camp survivor, one of his quotes that are my favorite, which I've just popped into the chat, is, between stimulus and response, there is a gap. In that gap, we can choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So some things can make us more resilient and grow. And some, however, they can make us shrink and contract. And what we know about the stress response in the body, so whenever there's something that comes up as a potential thorn that triggers the stress response, what happens is, so a quick science lesson, some of you may already know this, I find it fascinating every time I look into it. So your brain will acknowledge some kind of threat or some kind of stressor. That can be anything from a difficult colleague to a car that's about to swerve into you as you're walking along the pavement, to an email that you find a bit aggressive, to a thought in your head while you're lying in bed. So we have external and internal stressors, these things that trigger stress. And what happens is the HPA axis gets activated. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So from the brain, that's where the hypothalamus is, your adrenal glands. Do you know where your adrenal glands are? They sit on the top of your kidneys. They're the size of about a walnut. So if you put your hands, if you're able to, behind your back, your lower back, just maybe send a bit of appreciation there. I don't know when the last time was that you said hi and bye and thank you to your adrenals, but they work very hard. Those two little walnuts produce over 50 different chemicals. So they've got these two layers. You're welcome to leave your hands there if it's comfortable. And actually, it might be a nice stretch, a chest stretch, an opener, or relax them if you don't want to do that. So you've got epinephrine or adrenaline, which is released by the one part, and then you've got this thick layer on the outside that releases, as I said, over 50 different chemicals. So things like adrenaline, which is what gets blood going into your system to get you into fight or flight to deal with the stress. Glucocorticoids that help you keep going and bring glucose in to fuel the muscles. And then things like endorphins that help you actually not feel pain as much so you can push through. And all of those are meant to be quite short term. So what happens when you have the stress response is your heart will start to beat faster, you'll start to breathe faster and often a bit more shallow, your blood will circulate quicker, your blood pressure will go up, glucose will get pushed out of your liver to go feed your muscles, nutrients and blood will move away from your digestive system towards your limbs, because it's more important for you to be able to fight and deal and address the threat or to run and hide and get away from it than it is to digest your morning snack. And that's important. That's why a lot of us experience potential IBS, irritable bowel syndrome type symptoms like bloating or constipation, or our bowel habits change, or we get a bit of reflux. Our food doesn't digest so well. We start getting cravings. The microbiome in your gut gets disturbed. So your gut gets affected. Your reproductive system also doesn't get as much attention when you're in the stress response, because once again, long-term procreation is not as important as staying alive this afternoon, so that potentially you can have the intimacy that will lead to the procreation. So and also what happens to your brain is you get, now I'm not a scientist and there might be some doctors on the call or that watch this recording, but I like simplifying things. And what happens in stress, especially if you really get hijacked by the stress response, is you can have a lizard hijack wizard moment. The lizard, the back part of the brain that is all about survival, which is where the stress response is triggered, can override the prefrontal cortex. This is your wise wizard. And that also makes sense because it's not important for you to be able to keep big picture thinking and be creative when you need to focus on how you're going to hurdle over that wall while you're running. And so you start becoming much better at short-term memory and focusing on the particular things that can help you with that stressor at the moment. So I've shared a bit of theory. I'd like to know what's happening inside your body. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer for 60 seconds. And without changing your breath, I'd like you to count how many breath cycles you take in the next 60 seconds. So a breath cycle, let me copy and paste this into the chat. Where did I have that? No, I don't have that here. So in the next 60 seconds, as you breathe in and you breathe out, so an inhale, here we go. Some of you have done this exercise with me before. One inhale and one exhale is one cycle. And then I will tell you when a minute is up. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Bring your awareness to your chest, to your breath, and count how many breath cycles you take. If your mind has wandered, without criticism, simply bring it back to the breath. There we go. That is 1 minute. If you're happy to pop into the chat how many breath cycles you took, Jenny's on the button. Thanks. 10, 10, 8, 12, 9, 17, 15, 7, 7, 10, 12, 19. Sandy, is that 13? Yeah. Great. Okay. So why did I go straight to the breath? Because if this is the one thing you take from our time together, then 1 to you, 0 to burnout. Your breath is one of the most powerful regulators of the stress response. It's also one of the first places that you'll see potentially that you're getting pulled into this fight, flight, or freeze and fold response, which so many of us are pulled into, not just once a day, maybe once an hour, maybe once every quarter hour, depending on what our situation and lifestyle is like. So when we take deeper, slower breaths, especially if we take single digits, so somewhere between, say, 6 to 8 cycles per minute, it is almost physiologically impossible to go down the fight or flight response if you're breathing slowly and deeply. You may still be in a stressful situation and have something difficult to contend with, but your body won't go into what I just described, where your gut shuts down. It doesn't shut down completely, but you know what I mean? It doesn't work as effectively, reproductive doesn't, your immune system gets compromised, your brain. And so your breath is one of the fastest ways to help regulate that. And the way to do that is to try and take 6 to 8 breath cycles in a minute. So those of you, if you put in that you were having 15 or more breath cycles in that minute, if you go down to 8 straight away, you might pass out because you're going to breathe too slowly. So you've got to do this slowly and over time and with a sense of playfulness, because breath work, is one of the techniques I'm going to promote as a way to help us manage and increase our resilience to burnout. And if you aren't already experimenting with breath work, this is a really great place to start, is, maybe just over the rest of our time together is keep one of your hands on your belly, because where your attention goes, energy flows. And so keep a hand there so that it reminds you to breathe deeply into your belly. And then the key is in the exhale, because when you exhale, if you lengthen it consciously, you can activate the rest and digest nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the polyvagal. You might have heard some of these words around stress management, as opposed to the sympathetic, which is like the highway. That's the fight and flight, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the stuff that gets us ready to run and attack or to run away. So breathing a little deeper into your belly and lengthening your exhale. As you breathe more deeply and more slowly, what will happen is your heart and your brain start to become more aligned, especially if you make an effort to feel a positive emotion. So if you feel something that you are grateful for, or that you're celebrating, or that's making you happy, and you combine that with deep breathing, you can go into what we call heart coherence. And the heart coherence helps the heart and the brain align. And some of the latest research by Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's working along with HeartMath Institute. So perhaps Heather, if you don't mind popping in the HeartMath website. HeartMath are a great institute that have got a lot of free resources around heart coherence and breathing techniques that you can do that. And yeah, I attended a half-day event with Joe Dispenza at the beginning of the year, and the latest research is showing how within a few minutes, with this deep breathing and a positive emotion, they were doing brain scans. And most of us, like right now, are probably in beta brainwave, which is where you're concentrating, multitasking, doing a lot of things, taking in a lot. But we get more done in a more creative place if we can be more in the alpha brainwave. And by regulating your heart, you can get your brain to go into alpha, which means you're more creative and less likely to make mistakes, and things won't take twice as long. So yeah, thanks Heather for that. So how do you know when you're triggered into the stress response? Because you can't always like time a timer right for 60 seconds and say, well, I'm just going to check that my breath cycles are like 6 to 8. Does anybody else know what happens in their body? Because I do 3 things. So if I think of my body, my heart, and my mind. So in my body, I clench my jaw. So I consistently work at releasing the tension in my jaw. That's one of the first places that I know that I'm carrying stress, because the body responds to stress before the conscious mind does. So if you can pick up that your body is potentially acting like it's stressed and you relax it, you may not even have to worry about the rest. I also do something called, I heard this from Brene Brown actually, she calls it chandeliering, where you skrik vir niks. Claire will get that. And if anybody else speaks Afrikaans like Heather, when you skrik vir niks, it means you jump and you get very startled very easily, but for something very minor. So like you jump up to the chandelier. That's why she calls it chandeliering. So I do that. I chandelier, I clench my jaw. I'm wired and tired. So at night I can be dead tired, but then I have insomnia. That's another sign. And then in terms of my emotional well-being, I become very apathetic. I disconnect from my emotions, and I have what I call fuck it moments. Yep. Those are, I'm not proud of them. I have a handful of them that are really big red flags. That's where I just don't care. Like I have once sat on my bag in the middle of the London Underground and just cried because I just couldn't anymore. I haven't had one of those in a while. But it's good to know what do you do in your body, in your heart, in your emotional well-being, and in your mind that will alert you to, hey, I'm potentially not doing okay here. Because being proactive is much better than being reactive. So there's a definition for burnout. I'm going to share the definition, and then I'm going to ask you to come back to this question. I'll pop the question actually into the chat. Is to know when, if you think of the last 2 or 3 days. So some of us, depending on which time zone we're in, already at the end of Wednesday, you might just be starting your Wednesday, or you might be watching this recording on another day of the week. But if you reflect on the past few days, when have you perhaps not been at your best? Or when has something taken extra time? Or when have you felt maybe a sense of depletion in your energy? That's often a good place to start, is to look at where your energy drops, or maybe something that's made you feel like withdrawing. So keep that in mind, because that ties in with the definition of, from the World Health Organization, who gave burnout a definition when they realized that it became such a big issue. And here's the definition, and it's important because it leads into our acronym related to ice cream. That, by the way, is me. The last time I was in South Africa, sadly, was far too long ago. A year and a half ago in November, I was in a rose field next to a vineyard celebrating. It was a 50th birthday and it was magnificent. And that memory is one I often go back to when I need to come into that heart coherence. Because it's easy to say to you now, or for you to think, oh, I'm going to remember this. And yeah, that makes sense. I can go into alpha brainwave and I can take deep breaths. But you need to have anchors that work for you. So keeping pictures and photographs of positive memories or places, or I'm sure those of you that have kids and pets, you'll find that that's a quick way to help you feel a sense of potential joy. So burnout, according to the World Health Organization, is 3 things. It starts with a sense of ineffectiveness. So this is where you feel like you aren't as effective as you usually were, like you don't get things done as much, or things take longer. And you also feel as if potentially you're not getting anywhere or not doing anything of value. Your mood can shift, and you may potentially start feeling cynicism. So you lose interest in things that used to bring you a lot of joy. This is often referred to as depersonalization, and there's an increased sense of perhaps anxiety or withdrawal. You might also notice that in your emotional relationships that you're potentially a bit more snappy, or people say things about you and you're like, really? Am I doing that? No, it's like, and it always seems to be everybody else and not you. Just be alert to potentially those patterns and things coming up a bit much. And then, of course, there's the piece of exhaustion. So a lovely definition that I found is just like it's like the chronic fatigue that comes from caring too much for too long. So some exhaustion is normal. If however it goes on, and maybe this is actually quite important, is because burnout is a very serious health condition that if left unregulated, it has 4 stages. So when we talk about extreme burnout or adrenal fatigue, You start off in the alarm phase, then you move into resistance, and then exhaustion, and then collapse. And it's incredibly serious when you get to the point of exhaustion and collapse, because you start having organ system failure. So noticing things that happen right at the start is key. However, like, this presentation is not meant to replace any kind of medical advice. So if you're concerned about yourself or a loved one, is reach out to a mental health aid worker, or reach out to me. If I can help you, I will. If not, I'll try and find a resource who can. And there's also a lovely questionnaire that I found. Perhaps, Heather, if you don't mind popping that into the chat now, there's a burnout questionnaire that's quick and easy to do, because a lot of them are quite in depth, but I quite like that one. So if you're keen to, after the session at some point, you can always go and refer to that. So what about you? How have you been feeling in the last week? Have you felt maybe any of these things? Any sense of not being as effective, losing interest, exhaustion? I mean, I asked you to check in terms of 1 to 10 around your energy levels. And the energy is a big component, because we are energy systems. We're like batteries, like we need to recharge. And we recharge, yes, when we sleep, but there's also other ways, and necessary vital ways, for us to have micro recharges. Just like your cell phone, the more you use it, or the more you use your laptop without power plugged in, the more often you need to recharge it.
Celine,
yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I can't. So I think you're on the wrong screen. I don't know if everybody else has got my screen where I can see your slides, but I can't see the slides nicely because they're so small.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I see what you mean. So you're on presenter view.
Yes, there we go. Now we can see you. Cool. I couldn't see the picture.
And now? No, it's the same thing. Thanks.
No, now it's changed back to the old one.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'm going to unshare it and reshare.
Okay.
I think it's because I have a few things open. I'm going to try one more time. Claire, is it fixed or not? It's not fixed, no. No. Okay, so I'm just going to stick to it like this.
Yeah, because then we can see at least your little pictures and things. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I'll see if I can zoom that out a bit. I wonder why that's okay. So we are like energy systems. That might be a bit, that's too small. 50%. There we go. Or another analogy that I've often come across is like, we're like a bucket, and we've got to keep our bucket full. So, you know, we have things that take water out the bucket, working in school, and all those thorns. So that's why it's really good to have an idea of what are the places in your life where you are experiencing those. And then, are you refilling your bucket or refilling your cup of tea? There's also another example, could be a bank account. Like, if you keep withdrawing money out of the bank account and not put any in, you're going to get to a point where potentially there's not enough, right, to give you investment. So whatever works for you, whatever analogy around being a battery, being a bucket. I like the idea of the flowers and the roses. Actually, it's like, have I got enough roses and buds so that I notice those, even though there are some thorns? And if you've got pen and paper, if you are able to write, is take a moment now, and on the left-hand side, write down anything that comes to mind that potentially has caused your battery to go down, or your bucket to let something out, or maybe that you feel is a thorn. So trust that your intuition will bring to your conscious awareness whatever you need to write down now. There's no right or wrong, but let it flow and stream out in terms of what are all the things that might be draining you or depleting your energy or feeling like a bit of a challenge. And no one's going to look at this, so if you want to write down your kids or your other half, that's cool. We're just bringing this into our awareness. I'm going to share a little piece of music, and I'm going to give us another minute at most. So write down anything that comes up in the last week or so. What is causing you to feel a little stressed or drained? And if there are some that are particularly challenging for you, that you'd really like to shift, maybe circle that 1 or 2 or 3 things so that you can come back to them. Okay. Right. Claire, I'm going to, you and Heather, I'm going to use you as my anchor. I think I might have solved it. You should see the slide in full now. Yes, no? No. Yeah? Thanks. Right, so to move us into, so now we know, we can see we have lots of things that are causing us stress. We know the stress response is not a healthy place to live. We know that if we continue, burnout happens when we continuously in the space of hyperarousal and in the survival mode, the sympathetic overdrive. It's exhausting, and at some point your body can't quite keep up, and all the cortisol becomes pro-inflammatory, all the adrenaline actually becomes addictive. And that's why we get pulled into the cycle of like not being able to slow down. So we act like we're on fire. So what we're going to do is move into creative solutions so that you can leave here with a personal plan. And rather than feeling ineffective, we're going to use inspiration to combat that. And then rather than moving towards cynicism, we're going to take a look at what are ideas and ways that we can cultivate curiosity. And rather than feeling exhausted and tired, I mean, we even use language like I'm dead tired, which is exactly, you could be dead at some point if you don't manage your energy and refuel your battery or pick up the levels in your bucket or your bank account or make sure that your roses are well looked after, so to speak. So move from exhaustion rather to being more energized. And it's not about feeling amazing all the time. In fact, this is so important. Stress and a bit of challenge is necessary for evolution, for human progression and growth. It's how we respond to it that matters. So like that Viktor Frankl quote, we have the choice to choose how we respond, or we can just react or not do anything and get pulled into it left, right, and go all over. And that's where our growth and our freedom comes from. Like the David Whyte poem, we're able to notice what makes us alive, what makes us feel small. Where can we go to a place of darkness to heal and find these things? So you can see there the acronym ICE, maybe, inspiration, curiosity, and energized. Inspiration relates to the heart, curiosity relates to the mind, and energized relates to the body. And that's why I asked you what your favorite flavor of ice cream was. So that was the link to ICE. So what we're going to take a look at now is, how do you leave here with a bunch of ideas? So you don't need to be able to see that picture. In fact, I think that picture is too much. It's a post that I found. It's like 50 ways to take a break, which is great, but it's quite overwhelming, right? I just need 5. And why I'm going to ask you to write these down and have your own plan is because when you're super aroused and stressed and anxious or dead tired or very tired, it's hard to think about things, partly because of that lizard hijack wizard thing that's going on. So make it easy for yourself. Like, I'd like you to potentially have, an index card or some kind of poster or picture or reminder or post-it note of what your top 3 things are or top 5 things are that help to bring you inspiration, curiosity, and energy. So that's where we're heading. I'm going to share about 15 to 20 different ways that you could think about doing it in each. But I don't want you to leave here with 45 things to do. That's not the objective. The objective is for you to choose what resonates with you. And you may be doing some of these already. So maybe you could tweak them, or maybe when we do the group share, we could actually learn from each other. And I'm going to share some of the things that have worked and are working for me, knowing that we're all individual, right? Like, it's so important to try these things yourself and see if they work for you. So if we take a look at inspiration, is to really use inspiration. So like we just did the breath, is to breathe in, because without oxygen, we can't have energy. Our immune systems can't work that well. Our circulatory system doesn't work well. Your body needs air. So breathe, breathe. And you can deepen breath and do breath work and try different breathing techniques. I can really share a lot of resources around that if you'd like some. And then also use nature. I'm hoping that all of you are making a real effort to be in nature as often as possible, not just on weekends, because the more time we spend in the stress response and behind screens, the more we need to be outside, if you're able to, weather permitting and circumstances. And if you can't literally be in nature, to maybe use nature sounds like water or bird chirping music to help you wind down, especially at the end of the day. That can be quite helpful. And while I'm listing these, when you feel like something's a good idea, perhaps pop that down on the right-hand side. So next to where you've written down where all your thorns are, your energy drains, on the right-hand side, start maybe jotting down some ideas that you're like, hey, that sounds cool. Or, yeah, I forgot about that. I haven't done that in ages. Or, you know what, that sparked another idea. And then this concept of feeling positive emotions. The more often you can feel a positive emotion, the more you increase your frequency at which you vibrate. We know that this is good for the brain, good for the heart, good for the immune system. It's not always easy to do. And I would say one of my best resources in this is Danielle Laporte has written a book called The Desire Map. So here, I know I didn't share this link with you, but perhaps in the chat, just pop in Desire Map. It's a brilliant read, and she takes you through a lovely exercise on how you can learn to cultivate positive emotions. I've spoken about heart coherence, and you went into heart coherence by simply breathing deeply into your belly and thinking of something that you wanted to celebrate. And then keeping a gratitude journal, perhaps. So, oh yeah, I did. I just started a new one this year. So I had one that I kept for 5 years. It's quite cool because, like, you can see, you can write one, there's 5 years and you write down what you're grateful for. This has worked for me. Some people think it's too geeky. It doesn't quite work for them. I find every night or every morning, depending on which, if I miss the evening before or in the morning, I write 3 or 4 things that I'm grateful for about that day or the day before. And it's lovely when you keep track over a few years because you can look back. And what happens is that you release dopamine, you release oxytocin, you start looking for positive things to happen. So some lovely research by Sean Aker at Harvard around people who kept a gratitude journal. After, I think it was just 6 weeks, even people who tended towards pessimism started moving more towards being more optimistic and looking for good things. Music is a great mood shifter. In fact, don't just take my word for it. Let me try this. I'm going to play 30 seconds of a song. And whether you like the song or not, I don't particularly like it, but it gets me moving. So I'm going to put the volume up a bit, just warning in case I don't want you to get a fright. And notice what happens in your body as you hear the song. I'm happy if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy alone if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news talking. Okay, so it definitely worked for Alpha because I saw her jiving there. Music. Have you got a playlist that you can immediately go to that can help you either calm or maybe energize or dance? I often find myself when I'm feeling flat or I can just feel I'm full of stress hormones, I just dance like mad for 3 minutes while the kettle's boiling to a favorite dance tune. Music is a powerful way to shift your emotion, as is poetry, because often we can't find words to describe things. So, I mean, David White for me just touches my heart. And have you got your favorite poems? If it's something you've never tried, maybe this is something you could explore. And then bring in more play. When was the last time you played? Not just play board games, but really just did nothing, like acted like you were a little kitten or a puppy. And this is where pets are so good for us. They help to reduce our stress. And having kids, those of you that have kids, something I miss is young child energy, actually. And then creativity is so important. You know, there's a lovely quote. I'm not sure who said it. Take your broken or tired heart and turn it into art. So if any of you are creative and you do art, I'd love to know what you do. Perhaps you could pop it into the chat. This is a list that I came up with a client that I worked with. Painting, drawing, doodling, baking, cooking. You can create art in the kitchen, right? Gardening, growing things, growing herbs, learning to knit, learning to crochet, redecorating a room, moving furniture around, creating social events, even online, like fireside chats, build a bucket list, learn something new like calligraphy, create videos for children, mosaic, create a joy board. I mean, there's so many different ways to be creative. I've taken up building jigsaw puzzles, which I find takes my brain off problems and helps me to potentially feel good. And then another way to bring in inspiration and shift your emotion is through connection. And this is one of the hardest things many of us are experiencing because of isolation. There's something called hug till you relax. So when you hug somebody, to hold and hug, you might have heard that it's 20 seconds. It can be less or it can be more. It's to hug until you actually relax. That's when you get the benefits of the dopamine and the oxytocin and the heart connection. And if you aren't able to hug somebody else, you can always hug yourself. In fact, do that now. Just like you gave some love to your adrenals, is maybe give some love to your upper torso. You know, like you're doing great. We are doing amazing considering where we are and what we have. And then, of course, laughter, because laughter shifts your internal chemistry like nothing else can. I find I take myself very seriously, especially when I'm quite stressed. So I need to watch something to trigger the laughter. So at the moment, it's Russell Howard. Brilliant. I don't know, he cracks me up. So find something that makes you laugh. Think about what you last watched when you were on Netflix. Like, was it something funny and upbuilding? Or did it potentially create some thorns and pull you into the stress response? I mean, I'm watching a brilliant series at the moment, but I've noticed that I can't watch it right before I go to bed because I dream about fighting. It's Outlander, by the way, which is lovely, but pretty violent. So I've got to be careful about when I watch it. So think about what you watch. And then another way to bring in inspiration is to think about your community and how you can give back. Because giving is certainly a great gift, and how you can help. Is there somebody that you can reach out to? Maybe even do some kind of random act of kindness and make a game of that. I know there's someone on this call that every month treats a woman in her life to a bunch of flowers. Just like that. And I think it gives her more of a kick than the woman who received the flowers, to be honest. And then, of course, finding meaning and deep spirituality and prayer and faith. That is so important in terms of helping us keep big picture thinking, and not feel like it's all for nothing, or we get pulled down that spiral of stress and burnout. So what are yours? These are some of mine that I do. What about you? I'm going to give you 1 minute. Write down whatever comes to your mind. If there's other ideas, on the right-hand side, on the piece of paper that you've got, what are things that you've read that you like? Don't write too many though. You know, maybe 5 as a maximum, because if you go more than 5, you're going to be taking too much, because we've still got another 2 to go through. I'm just going to check the chat because I see it's popping up. Chilling in a bath while listening to a podcast. Yeah, I'm going to mention podcasts in a moment. Fresh air, art therapy. Yeah, sound therapy. I've experienced a gong bath thanks to a very dear friend who's on this call too. Journeying, lovely. Anyone with a dog who has to go dog walking, it's a very good thing. Lovely. And if you're interested in watching a TED Talk that will give you a lot of ideas of where you can find joy and inspiration in nature without having to spend a lot of money, I would highly recommend this talk. It's called Where Joy Hides and How to Find It by Ingrid Fettel-Lee. It's a really, really good TED Talk. So we've taken a look at how you can inspire your emotions. We're going to move on to curiosity. And here are some of the things that I do. I practice mindfulness. Specifically, there's a technique that I'm using a lot at the moment called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let's give it a try. So for those of you that can, if you aren't driving, I can't always tell if your camera's off. I'd like you, starting with 5, notice 5 things in the room around you And don't forget to look to the sides and potentially behind you. 5 things that you like, 5 things that bring you joy, and just mention them to yourself. Five things. Now I'd like you to bring your awareness to your sense of touch. What can you, 4 things that you can feel? So I can feel the ground beneath my feet. Maybe you can feel the chair that you're sitting on. Maybe you can feel the fabric of your clothes on your skin. I can feel my hair kind of tickling my neck. Can you feel the temperature of the air? And then 3 things that you can hear. You can hear my voice. But what else can you hear outside of the room that you're in? Maybe outside the window if there is one. Ah, lovely. Someone can hear rain. And then 2 things that you can smell. What I'd like you to do is use this opportunity to take 2 deep breaths. So breathe in deeply through your nose and imagine, because your imagination is very powerful, what you'd like to be smelling. Maybe it's vanilla, maybe it's lavender, maybe it's rosemary, maybe it's fresh mint, maybe it's the smell of your pet or your child or your linen, something that makes you joyful, that you enjoy the smell of. And lastly, think of one thing that you like to taste. Maybe it's a piece of dark chocolate or a sip of your favorite Malbec, or maybe you need to actually take a sip of water. Like I just realized I'm a bit dehydrated. Right, and this exercise brings you into the present moment. And if you'd like to have a description of it, Heather, if you don't mind sharing in the chat the PDF that's titled Mindful Moments, and also the one called Joie de Vivre. So these are 2 gifts that I'm giving you. The Joie de Vivre has got the link to the TED Talk and a few other things around cultivating joy. Thank you. Thank you. And you can download these directly now off the chat if you'd like to do that. Yeah, it's so easy to get so busy that we forget to actually stop and use our senses to smell, to hear, to taste, to be fully in this moment. And it helps us because then we're not in the future or the past. So other things you can do to cultivate curiosity is learn new things. I'm trying to improve my French. So once or twice a week, I'm reading a bit more French. I mean, you can learn anything from French to calligraphy, right? Doing puzzles that challenge the way that you think. Trying different forms of meditation, also staying curious about your boundaries. Like, what do you need to let in? What do you need more of? But what do you also need less of and to say no to? And a big journey that I'm busy exploring at the moment is more about understanding myself. So knowing about my personal blind spots and working with a coach and using, there's many different personality systems that you can use to help you understand you and what takes you down that road towards burnout. I also set daily intentions of how I want to feel. I sometimes use mantras, but mantras must be done from a place of truly believing and feeling that you can achieve that, rather than, it's realistic optimism, as opposed to saying, I'm going to do okay, but you're actually not feeling okay. And then, like I've mentioned, there's such brilliant resources out there from podcasts and different conversations that are starting. You could use rituals to help you tune in at the start of your day or tune out at the end of your day. What I've started doing is shutting down my laptop at the end of the day. I never used to do that, and it's making it easier for me not to get tempted to come back and work again late at night. And then thinking about others, like who else could you help? So take a moment and think, have any of these ideas sparked some more ideas for you? Was there any that you'd like to try or potentially explore more of? Let me just go back to that and leave that up just for a second. Welcome to Amanda, who's joined us. And then is anybody actually, oh great, hey Heather, I thought you sent the messages, the PDF just to me, but I see you shared it with everyone, which is great. Does anybody use reframing or questions to help shift when they're in potentially a stressful place? Because these are quite powerful. They just take quite a bit of practice, I find. So what I've been doing is when I find myself triggered into the stress response, is I don't use all these questions. I've got 2 at the moment that I'm using, but here are a sample of a few. And I'd like you to pick one that you resonate with, or if you have one that's working with you for you already, then perhaps you could share that with us in the chat or when we have a group discussion in a minute. So you could ask yourself, for instance, what makes me strong and capable in this situation? Where am I making things more complex than they need to be? And this is one of the ones that I'm working with myself. What would this look like if it were easy? So when something's difficult, I ask myself, what could this look like if it was easy? And just by asking that question, your imagination kicks in and your subconscious potentially brings you solutions that you may not have thought of if you just try to stay in control with your conscious mind. Another question, what if I did the opposite of what I usually do? What am I doing today to feel the way I want to feel? Because we can get very caught up in doing and then forget about feeling. And then if you could only work for say 2 hours or 4 hours a day, what would you do? So these kind of conscious questions can also help to reframe situations. Michael, your question about will the slides be available? Yes, I can make them available for sure. And then lastly, in terms of boosting your energy levels and using your body, there's an assessment that I've got that I use called the Wellculator. I'm not going to go into that today, but if you don't have a high Wellculator score, I would say that's a very good place to start, because those are the basic things that you should be doing around hydrating, feeding your gut, getting enough rest, knowing some of your health numbers. And as another gift I wanted to share with you, I hope this is not too overwhelming. I'm hoping that you'll take what you need, is the Wellculator. So Heather, if you're happy to pop that into the chat, if you'd like to go through the assessment and give yourself a score, those of you that have been through it, you know what it's about. But it's so important to make sure that you have the fundamentals in place, especially when you're wanting to manage your energy levels and with a strong focus on gut health. So I've done a whole masterclass that's separate to this on that topic. But stress impacts our gut, and then the microbiome are not happy, and then our immunity suffers. So we want to be able to really keep ourselves strong from the inside. And then another way to help us is to release emotions, because emotions get pent up. What we suppress will be expressed. I know, Michael, you liked it when I said that. So how do you release emotions? Any kind of motion. Motion shifts emotion. If you think of the word emotion, it has motion in it for a reason, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen footage of a wild animal getting chased, like an impala by a lion. Any animal that goes, actually any primate that goes through stress will afterwards tremor and shake to release that. So if you go for a run and you do some exercise, or you go and dance like mad, you can release the stress that's potentially pent up in the day, but also just basic shaking. So we've been sitting for a while. I noticed that a few of you have got up and stretched. Well done. I'm going to give you exactly 1 minute to move. But before you do that, notice what your energy levels are like right now. And then we're going to check in again after we move. And I'm going to share a piece of music to inspire you. Here we go. And it's going to be about 45 seconds. And I encourage you to just shake. No one's watching you. You don't have to dance. You don't have to look good. There's no coordination to do. All you're going to do is allow your body to shake it off. Awesome. Notice that was 45 seconds. How does your energy feel now after that little bit of moving? Did it go up? Thumbs up? Yeah, I see a lot more smiles. Philip, thanks for that. Motion is so important. We sit too much. Like sitting is the new smoking. It's so not cool for you. And actually, these micro bursts of activity are probably better than sitting still the whole day and then only just going for maybe a half an hour walk. Okay, so I am now going to create the opportunity to have small groups, and we're going to have a discussion to pull this together. What I'd like you to do is share in the breakout, well, they're breakout rooms, but I like to call them breakthrough rooms, is out of all the ideas that I shared, what are your top 1 to 3 for how you will potentially boost your inspiration? How will you cultivate more curiosity? How will you manage your energy levels? And feel free to like deeply listen to what others share and steal ideas. Because the wisdom is always in the room and in the collective, and we are in this together. So we'll have, so be conscious of not overriding. I'm going to make the rooms about 3 to 4 people each, and then you'll have about a minute or a minute and a half each to share. So a total of, say, 5 minutes to share different ideas and see who's going to do what. But this is taking you towards what your personal pledge is going to be. The 1 to 3 things that you can take, that you can write down on an index card and keep close at hand and use over the next few weeks. If you aren't familiar with breakout rooms, you should see an invitation to invite you to a breakout room, and you say yes. And if you don't want to chat in the breakout room, you can always say, I'd like to not chat. You can just listen, and I'll broadcast when you have about a minute or 2 left so that you know you can wind down. And just be sensitive to giving everybody a bit of a chance to share. And I'll see you back in the main room in about 5 to 6 minutes.
Celine, I'm going to use this opportunity to sneak out.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you for this. It was lovely.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Celine, hi, I'm going to drop off as well, unfortunately. Thank you, but I just need to move on to something else, sorry.
Sure.
Really interesting, thank you.
Thank you. Look out for the thank you note.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
No.
Hmm.
Oh, we were in the middle of a really good chat as well. Whoops.
Sometimes it can feel like you get pulled through a time portal.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to
Go
carry on with your chat? Because the others are only going to join in about 20
Okay.
seconds. I'm not sure, Jenny. Ash, were you with Jenny?
I was
No.
with Portia and Diane.
Okay, okay.
No, I didn't see. I saw Jenny online, but I haven't been with her this time around. I was with her last time.
She
Okay.
was with me actually. Both Jenny's in the same one.
To put Jenny down now.
Welcome back. I was just saying, I hope that doesn't feel too much like a time portal where you get sucked out. Would anybody like to share if they've had like a great insight of something that is going to work, that they're going to try and put into place?
We had a really nice group, the three of us, and we concluded that learning to say no is more liberating than saying yes. And
Wonderful.
we're going to have a red line in our diary every day, whatever the time is, that let's say it's 5:30, that's it, computer goes off and we're not working beyond that point. And then it's all self-love and self-time, but also, you know, during the day as well, have some treats in there. So you're blocking out various parts of your diary just for yourself.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Louisa, yeah, a conversation around boundaries. That's lovely. I did a small section on boundaries in September. Let me give that thought. I think that's a great topic. I think what I would do is potentially interview one or two people that could help with that. So thanks for that. Anybody else like to share something that popped out of the group that was a surprise? Or
There was something that came up in our group, and it was just about the fact that I think for all of us, there was little things that we already do that we could just amplify.
Yeah.
And that's just key, isn't it, really? Like, we might do it once a week, or it might have been a practice that we've lost. So it's just, could we bring that in a small way, and reintroduce it again, or do a bit more of it? So for me, playing with the dogs, I might do once a week, twice a week. But it always brings me joy. So maybe I could do that for 10 minutes every day instead of just that half an hour at the weekend or on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's lovely, Louisa. And Philip? And then
Yeah, I shared this with the group, but I think it's worth sharing again. I heard on the news today, David Attenborough talking about a podcast he's launching, and it was quite arresting because the little snippet they played on the radio was, sit still, be quiet, and listen. And he did it with those kind of pauses, and it was really arresting. And then I thought, well, what do you mean sit still, listen? And he was saying, when you go into nature, which a lot of us may do, we very rarely just sit completely still. And he said, if you sit still and don't make a noise or a sound for about 10 minutes, all of the animals and insects and birds around you will start to carry on as normal. And I just thought it was a lovely twist on being in nature, that stillness to allow nature to actually happen around us rather than just walking through it.
yeah, Philip, really good point. In fact, one of the questions I was going to ask, but it was too much in the preparation for today, was I was going to ask you to reflect on when was the last time you sat for 10 minutes and did nothing, not even looked at your phone or wrote something or did a mental checklist, but just did nothing. Yeah. I can't always say that I do enough of that. And when I asked you to write down in the last few days all the things that were draining your energy, you might notice that many of those things happen consistently every day. And that's why once a week, having a bubble bath or playing with the dogs is not enough, because we're never going to get a balance. We're always going to have more and more drain. We need to equalize, and if not, have more moments of joy. So I love, Louisa, that you've shared that actually this is a reminder of what you're doing, but perhaps we need to find ways to bring them in more into our busy routine. And this is where it's so important, because to set yourself up for success, it's important to think about what can help you succeed, but also what might trip you up. So as we head towards a close, think think about the question that I've just popped into the chat. Your plan to do these 1 or 2 or 3 things more often may not work because, like, what may come up? Because if you troubleshoot and prepare your mind for it now, it can help you think of solutions potentially to then answer question 2. To help my plan succeed, I will ... So for instance, in the mornings, I want to exercise first thing, but I often don't. So what helps is I put my exercise clothes on the floor next to the bed, so that when I wake up, I get dressed into exercise clothes, and then I'm more likely to get out. Because I love my work so much that I can often then get pulled into work and not benefit from moving earlier in the day, because that helps produce endorphins and all that stuff. So choose one thing out of your list and just make a mental note to yourself, what might make it difficult? Why might my idea of doing this particular thing not work? And write down whatever comes up for you. And then think about how could you set yourself up for success based on those things that might trip you up. And then, Jenny, it's almost like I asked you to put that in the chat, but I was actually going to say right now, is there something you can write on a post-it note or send a WhatsApp to a friend to remind them of what you're going to do, or put an alarm in your phone, or move something out the way that it can remind you to go do this? Because immediately as we say goodbye in the next few minutes or so, you might get pulled into something else. And if you leave here with one thing that you can really put into your routine, be it, shake to a song when you're making your 10 o'clock morning cup of tea, or getting to bed a bit earlier, or, watching a TED talk every day, or not looking at your phone before a certain amount of time, then we can really start making inroads into building that inner sense of joy and helping your roses and your buds, because all these ideas that I've shared are potential roses. They can grow into things that you'll celebrate, that will become part of your routine and your ritual. And when you've got lots of roses and rosebuds, like, you don't notice the thorns. And in fact, the thorns almost become beautiful. So yeah. Have you got that written down, or set an alarm? And if you pop it into the chat, it's almost like a public declaration that I get to see it in others. So feel free to do that. And then I'm going to share one or two more slides to share the date of when we can connect again. And please look out for a thank you note from me. If you don't get a note from me, it's because I think there were about 10 people that registered that did not say that they'd like to receive emails. And then my system completely overrides, and then you never hear from me again. And if you would like to, then I'd like to be able to communicate with you. Hang on, this webcam is doing a few strange things. And on Friday, the 26th, if you'd like to pop in and celebrate your successes, or talk about challenges, or have any questions around anything we've discussed today, I'll be available. So I'll pop that into the thank you note with the Zoom link. And that's really informal. You can pop in for 5 minutes, or you can stay for the whole hour, and we can just help one another. And then next month, the masterclass, you may be interested, is going to build on this topic. It's called Tune Out to Tune In. And it's specifically going to be about how we can explore ways to tune in, to switch on in the mornings and feel energized and motivated for work. Especially now that we're not going out the front door to work and coming back in. Many of us are still remote working. But more importantly, also how to switch off. So how to unplug and relax to be able to really rest into the evening and induce good sleep. So that will be on Wednesday, the same Wednesday, actually, in a month's time, Wednesday, the 17th of March. And you'll be able to register for that from next week when I have that up on my website. I would love to hear from you. If you would, as you adieu and say goodbye, pop into the chat, what has been your greatest insight today? It might have been somebody else that you saw on the call. It might have been something I said, an idea. It could be your takeaway. What has been your greatest insight? Thank you. 54321. great to know you're not alone. I promise you that. I teach this stuff every day, and I don't have all the answers, and I sometimes can't even look after me. So no, we're not alone. Thank you, Heather, for popping in the website. And Michael, you learned lots, but I want to be sure that you've got one clear thing to do. And Pila, you joined 10 minutes ago, and you've enjoyed, or you can watch the recording. I'd love you to do that. And I think I'm going to do this masterclass again. It feels as important, if not more, than the gut health one that I did. So more singing, nice playlists. Very nice. Very nice. And Louise, I see you've taken Philip's idea of going into nature. Nature is such powerful medicine, so powerful. I didn't even speak about, but I will in the next masterclass, concepts like grounding and cold exposure and that kind of thing. And Laura, please do the Wellculator. I'd love to know what your score is. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And I just want to say that you are doing amazing. We're all doing amazing. In the context of where we're at, absolutely incredible. So I'm happy to linger and stay on if anybody wants to stay. If you need to go, I just want to thank you for the gift of your time and energy. And I look forward to seeing you again. Sante.
Thank you, Celine.
Thank you, Philip.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Celine.
Thanks, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. It was great.
Thanks, Alpha.
Bye.
Is it Alpha or Alpha?
Alpa.
Alpha, thank you. See you next time.
For sure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Frank.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So if I may, Celine, because I